Imagine you've done everything right. You saved for 30 years, you paid off the house, you researched, you visited on a long weekend in October. The weather was perfect, the downtown was charming, the people were friendly. You made the move. And then, 6 months later, you're sitting at your kitchen table staring at a water bill that tripled. Your neighbors are gone. Not moved away, just gone all summer. The downtown shuts down by 8 o'clock. The hospital that was listed on every retirement website, it closed its emergency room 6 weeks after you arrived. The property taxes you were promised, locked in, they said, just got reassessed upward by 40%. This isn't a horror story. This is a pattern. It's happening in Asheville, North Carolina, in Sedona, Arizona, in Sarasota, Florida, in Cape May, New Jersey, in Taos, New Mexico, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. These towns were sold to you by real estate magazines, by influencer blogs, by retirement listicles as paradise. And in photographs, they still are. But photographs don't show you the flooding. They don't show you the waiting rooms. They don't show you the lease renewals. And they certainly don't show you what's coming in 2026 and beyond. Stay until the end, because the last town on this list has a detail that almost nobody is talking about, and it changes the calculus on everything. Here's what's actually happening in American retirement geography right now. Between 2020 and 2024, over 4 million Americans relocated specifically in anticipation of retirement. That's not retirees moving. That's pre-retirees repositioning, often a decade early, chasing lower costs, milder climates, and a slower pace of life. And the towns they moved to were not random. They were heavily marketed. There is a retirement relocation industry worth billions annually that produces content designed to make certain places look irresistible. Forbes, Money Magazine, U.S. News, Kiplinger, they all publish best places to retire lists. And those lists drive real migration patterns. But here's what those lists don't include: disaster risk scores, infrastructure age, hospital closure rates, climate projection data past 2030, HOA litigation trends, property tax reassessment cycles, the ratio of seasonal tourists to full-time residents, or what happens to a small-town economy when the demographic you just joined becomes the dominant one. Because here's the quiet truth. When retirement towns become too popular with retirees, they begin to fail the very people who moved there for safety, affordability, and community. 6 towns, 6 different failure modes. Let's go through them one by one. Asheville looked like the answer to everything. Mild mountain weather, a thriving arts scene, farm-to-table restaurants, relatively affordable real estate by 2020 standards. And it consistently ranked in the top 5 of every major retirement list from 2018 through 2023. Then came September 2024. Hurricane Helene made landfall as a Category 4 and tracked directly over the western North Carolina mountains, a region that had never seen flooding at that scale in recorded history. Asheville's river gauge stations recorded water levels 30 feet above flood stage. The Buncombe County infrastructure, bridges, roads, water treatment, was not built for it. Large portions of the city lost running water for weeks, some neighborhoods, months. But here's what nobody is talking about. Asheville's flooding wasn't a black swan. Climate models had been flagging western North Carolina as an emerging flood risk corridor since at least 2019. The combination of Appalachian topography, which funnels storm moisture, and aging stormwater infrastructure created a predictable vulnerability. It just wasn't in the brochures. In the aftermath, home insurance in Buncombe County became either unavailable or unaffordable for many homeowners. Carriers began pulling out of the market entirely, a pattern we'll see again later in this list. And here's the quiet statistic that tells you everything. In the 12 months following Helene, new listings in Asheville increased by 61%. Not because the market recovered, but because people who could leave left. Many of them were retirees who had moved there specifically for what they thought was mountain safety. They traded coastal flood risk for mountain flood risk, and nobody warned them. Sedona is, objectively, one of the most visually stunning places in the United States. Red rock formations, spiritual energy centers, yoga retreats, endless sunshine, and a retirement demographic that has been growing for 2 decades. But Sedona has a problem that its Instagram presence has completely obscured. It is a service desert with a wildfire halo. Here's what that means. Sedona has approximately 11,000 full-time residents. In peak tourist season, that population swells to over 3 million annual visitors passing through. The roads, primarily State Route 89A, were not designed for this. Traffic on that road has become so severe that local residents have reported being unable to evacuate during wildfire drills and under the required time window. And wildfires are not hypothetical in Sedona. The Coconino National Forest, which surrounds the city on 3 sides, experienced multiple significant fire events between 2020 and 2024. The evacuation routes, limited by geography, have been flagged by Arizona emergency management officials as inadequate. But it gets worse. The Verde Valley Medical Center, which serves Sedona, has been operating under staffing shortages so severe that as of late 2024, wait times for non-emergency specialist appointments exceeded 4 months. For a retirement population, which statistically requires more frequent medical interaction, this is not a minor inconvenience. It is a structural risk. And then there's water. Sedona sits in one of the driest regions of an increasingly dry state. Arizona's water allocation fights over the Colorado River, over groundwater rights, are becoming a defining political crisis. Sedona's long-term water security is not guaranteed. A town of 11,000 with constrained evacuation routes, inadequate medical access, wildfire exposure, and a water question mark is being sold right now as a retirement paradise. The listings haven't updated. The ranking articles haven't updated. But the risk has. Let's zoom out for a moment. Florida has, for decades, been the default answer to American retirement, and Sarasota has been the upscale answer within Florida. Arts, culture, beaches, a sophisticated dining scene, and a median age that makes it feel like a retirement town that doesn't quite know it is one. Here's the number that should reframe everything. In 2024, Florida had the highest homeowners insurance premium increases of any state in the country, averaging over 40% in a single year for many policyholders. In coastal counties, including Sarasota County, several major national carriers have exited the market entirely. What does that mean practically? It means Florida homeowners are increasingly dependent on Citizens Property Insurance, the state-backed insurer of last resort, and Citizens, as of 2025, has been actively pushing depopulation programs, transferring policies to smaller private carriers that many homeowners have never heard of, some of which have questionable financial stability ratings. But here's the part that turns this from an insurance story into a retirement story. A fixed-income retiree who bought a $400,000 home in Sarasota in 2021 may now be paying insurance premiums that have doubled or tripled on an income that hasn't moved. And if they can't afford insurance, their mortgage is in technical default. And if they sell, they're selling into a market where buyers are asking hard questions about insurability before they even look at the kitchen. Sarasota's real estate market is not collapsing, but it is bifurcating into properties that are insurable and properties that are becoming progressively harder to sell without significant price concessions. And this pattern, it's not unique to Sarasota. It's the entire Gulf Coast. It's the entire state. But Sarasota was the dream. And the dream now comes with an asterisk the size of a hurricane. Cape May is the oldest seaside resort in America. Victorian architecture, a walkable downtown, whale watching, bed and breakfast with wraparound porches. It also floods. Regularly, predictably, and increasingly. Here's what makes Cape May different from the other towns on this list. The risk is not coming. It's already arrived, and it's been quietly normalized. Sea level rise along the New Jersey coast is among the fastest in the continental United States, a function of both global ocean rise and the geological subsidence of the mid-Atlantic coast, which is literally sinking. NOAA's tide gauge at Cape May shows sea level has risen approximately 17 inches since 1911, and the rate is accelerating. The town floods now during significant rainstorms that have nothing to do with hurricanes. Sunny day flooding, tidal flooding that occurs during high tide without any storm present, has become routine in low-lying sections of the Cape May Peninsula. And here's the question nobody is asking at the closing table. What does a 30-year mortgage on a property in a FAMA special flood hazard area look like in 2045? Because the person selling you that Victorian cottage is probably not planning to be there in 2045, but you might be. National Flood Insurance Program rates in Cape May have increased substantially under FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0 methodology, a more actuarially honest pricing model that is now reflecting true flood risk for the first time. For some properties, annual flood insurance costs have increased by thousands of dollars. The Victorian charm is real, the community is genuine, but the ground it sits on is slowly, measurably going underwater. Taos is a town that has been romanticized for over a century, first by artists, then by countercultural movements, and now by remote workers and retirees seeking authenticity, altitude, and affordability relative to the coasts. Here's what Taos actually is: a small, economically fragile mountain town of approximately 6,000 people, with a median household income well below the national average, a housing market that has been dramatically distorted by outside buyers, and a healthcare infrastructure that cannot support the demographic that is currently moving into it. The Taos Valley, like many rural New Mexico communities, has one primary hospital, Holy Cross Medical Center, which has faced persistent financial stress, service reductions, and staffing challenges for years. Rural hospital closures are a national crisis. Over 140 rural hospitals have closed since 2010. And the communities hit hardest are often the ones that look most appealing to retirees. Scenic, quiet, remote. Remote is the word, because Taos is genuinely remote. The nearest Level 1 trauma center is in Albuquerque, roughly 2.5 hours away under good road conditions. In winter, on icy mountain roads, that distance becomes a different calculation entirely. And then there's the affordability question. Taos was affordable until it became discovered. Between 2020 and 2023, median home prices in Taos County increased by over 60%, driven in large part by out-of-state buyers paying cash and pricing out local workers. The irony is brutal. The town is losing the workforce: teachers, nurses, grocery store employees, restaurant staff that makes daily life functional, because those workers can no longer afford to live there. A retirement community that cannot retain its service workforce is not a community. It's a waiting room. And now we arrive at the town at the end of the list, the one with the detail that changes the calculus on everything. Coeur d'Alene, CDA as locals call it, became one of the most aggressively promoted retirement and relocation destinations in the country between 2019 and 2023. Beautiful lake, affordable by West Coast standards, low state income tax, seemingly endless outdoor recreation, and politically it attracted a very specific migration wave. People leaving California, Washington, and Oregon in search of a more conservative political and social environment. That migration was real, significant, and it fundamentally altered the character of the city. Here's the detail. Coeur d'Alene sits in Kootenai County, and Kootenai County, as of 2024, has been identified by multiple civil society monitoring organizations as one of the highest concentrations of active domestic extremist group activity in the American West. The Aryan nations historically operated in this region. More recently, organized white nationalist groups have actively recruited in North Idaho and staged multiple public demonstrations in Coeur d'Alene itself, including an incident in 2022 where members of a white nationalist organization were arrested near a local pride event carrying weapons and riot gear. This is not a political commentary. This is a community safety and social stability assessment. For a retirement population that may include people of color, LGBTQ plus individuals, interfaith households, or simply people who moved there for scenery and expected a peaceful, inclusive small-town experience, the social environment of Coeur d'Alene represents a risk that no retirement ranking has ever quantified, and it connects to a larger unspoken pattern in retirement migration. The places that are safe, politically and culturally, for one group of retirees may be actively hostile to another. That variable, the social climate of a community, is invisible in median home price data, invisible in cost of living indices, and invisible in weather forecasts. But it is the variable that determines whether you belong. Here's where this is going. By 2030, the United States will have more people over 65 than under 18 for the first time in the country's history. The retirement migration wave that distorted these 6 towns is not finished. It has barely begun. And the towns being marketed right now, the new Asheville's, the new Sarasotas, the new Taosas, are following the same pattern. Discovery, promotion, price appreciation, infrastructure strain, demographic saturation, and then a slow, quiet decline in the very qualities that made them worth discovering. The people who lose in this cycle are always the same. The retirees who moved last, who paid peak prices, who bought the dream at the top of the market in towns that were already past the moment when the dream was real. What the data shows, across climate risk models, insurance market trends, rural hospital closure projections, and water scarcity forecasts, is that the window for safe, affordable, sustainable retirement relocation in the United States is narrowing, not closing. Narrowing. The towns that will hold their value, financially, socially, infrastructurally, are the ones that have never made a retirement listicle. The ones that have functional hospitals, diversified economies, realistic flood maps, and communities that existed before the migration wave arrived. Those towns are harder to find. They're not in the magazines. They don't have good light for Instagram, but they work, and in the end, that's the only thing that matters.